Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Today we have the 33rd U.S. Secretary of Agriculture with us. It is Brooke Rollins. Thank you so much, Secretary, for joining me.
Well, Tudor, it's so fun to be here. I'm just really honored to be a part of it.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I think a lot of people see the administration from afar and they don't understand the qualifications that everybody has. And as I learn about your life growing up on a family farm, going to school on an ag scholarship, everything that has led up to this moment, and just the godliness throughout, like God taking care of you throughout this. And I was reading about how you say when you were raising your kids and they were younger, you were called on to step into the first administration. You were like, this is not, I can't do this. And I know that feeling as a mom, but you did. And look at what you are doing now.
Yeah, well, it really is all about God. I mean, I know we're here to talk about agriculture and here to talk about the U.S. Department and this president who's transforming and saving America. But at the end of the day, this all goes back to God and meeting your moment and being able to answer the call that God has on your life. And it's funny, we're studying Exodus in my church right now and how God had called Moses, right, using the burning bush. And he called Moses over and over again. And he said, I'm calling you and I need you to stand up and take my people, right, and get them out from the Pharaoh. And every time Moses said, I'm not ready, or this isn't right for me, or I don't have what it takes. And the whole scriptural lesson of Exodus is that when God calls, you answer, and that he will be there beside you on your walk. And as you are being asked to do perhaps things you never expected or things you think are too difficult, that nothing is too big for God. And if he's there with you, then it's beyond what you could have ever imagined. And so for me, that's what this is. And in the first administration where I was the president's chief policy lead, to your point, I said no multiple times because I had a third grader, a fifth grader, a sixth grader, and an eighth grader at the time. They're now 9th, 11th, 12th in college, but at the time they were much younger. And I just kept saying, I can't leave those kids every day for this sort of a job. I can't do both of them well enough. And the president, and through a lot of prayer and a very supportive husband, we did take that job. The kids did move with me to Washington. We homeschooled them up here. And it ended up being the greatest 3 years for my kids, for my family. And so when called again for this job, unexpectedly, I felt such a peace about it. My kids were more excited. I said, "Oh, I think I need to obviously with 3 high schoolers." And the kids said, "No, Mom, you can do it all. We'll pick up any slack." And it's been an incredible blessing. I will say it's not easy, but the president's vision was never about easy, right? It was about what we need to do to meet this moment with God alongside us to save America. And that's what I think we're doing.
I'm glad you said it's not easy, because I think that's what people aren't seeing if you don't have friends within the administration. But for folks like me and for you, obviously you're there seeing it and doing it and working it every single day. It is a 19, 20 hour a day job. And everybody I talk to is like, we are not slowing down.
Yeah.
And it's funny because even at the 100 days celebration, I talked to somebody and she was like, I'm kind of hoping that it goes a little slower now that it's been 100 days. And I looked at her and I go, but it's not. She was like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
No, I think that's right. But from my perspective, this is the incredible joy of this administration. I loved my 3 years in Trump 1. I was there year 2, year 3, and year 4. And I loved those 3 years. For me, it was the answer to a prayer that God has given us an opportunity to save America again. I mean, when I agreed to come to the White House in that first time, literally everyone said, well, good luck with that, right? That DC is so broken, it can never be fixed. But good luck. And I just felt I had to try. And when we left, even in those dark days of having an election taken from us, the January 6th, and everyone saying that America First was dead, that, all the things we had done was kind of poofed up into the air, that no one would ever remember us in a positive way, which is the reason I started America First policy, was to counter that and continue the legacy. But even amongst all of that, the opportunity to now come together, to build on the first term, that 4 years of what I call the Great Pause, which allowed us to get really organized and draft executive orders and be prepared. And now that meeting of that moment with friends, you can't slow down. Slowing down is not an option. We've got basically 4 years now, a little bit less than 4. I had lunch today with the administrator of the Small Business Administration, Kelly Loeffler, who's part of the cabinet. And she said, we're about 10% of the way in, 10%. And while some people think that's not much, for me, it makes me panic. I'm like, wait a minute, we've already driven through 10%. We only have 90% left. We got to go faster. That's how I think about it.
And I think it's also, we're into the first year now, and we're getting headed toward the midterms. And there is this attack from the media right now, which it's kind of interesting to watch them in this crisis mode too, as they're being exposed for lying about Joe Biden and all of that. But we're going into the midterms. And I think it's so important. I mean, I watched what you did with America First policy, and people don't know that side. I think that was something that people didn't get to see, how hard people were working in what you called the pause.
Yeah.
But the pause was another God moment, because you needed that to make sure you were ready because of the speed that this administration has to go at in 4 years. I just love that. I love what you were able to do with America First policy. I love what the team at America First Works was able to do and how that came together for that election. You've been by the president's side no matter what, always supporting him, always a team member. And now you have one of the most important positions in the administration, if not the most important. And I say that because food security, you made a comment and said, if you don't have food security, you're no longer a nation.
Yeah.
That's so key. If
you can't feed yourself, and if you're reliant on China or Russia or other countries to feed your people, doesn't matter what else you have. It doesn't matter. You will never be the economic and the freedom engine for the world again. That's what we face as Americans right now. And that's why I know, kind of pivoting a little bit into our current administration, what we're doing on trade and tariffs is important. But one thing I want to say, Tudor, I don't know that I've ever said this publicly, to have watched President Trump and been by his side, as you mentioned, to have near daily calls with him, at least 21 and 22, when, you were always on the team and there were others too. And I don't want to put myself up as, the special person in that. But there for a while, there were some dark days. And a lot of people said we need to move away from President Trump, that he's so divisive, that all these things. And just said, this is the man that God has chosen for this time. And his boldness and courage is now turning into fearlessness. And that is what it's going to take to save a nation. It's the same fearlessness, I believe, that George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, sort of all the great leaders in our movement. And, a lot of people say, oh, well, but he's, don't put him in that category. But I do put him in that category because he was a businessman from New York who left a beautiful life of luxury where everyone loved him to move into this darkness. And it is dark. You know this, Tudor. I mean, it takes some real conviction to bring light into what is a very dark industry, which is politics, and to always stay focused on the light. And for President Trump, and it breaks my heart to think what he went through personally as my friend, as my former boss, as my current boss, just watching that, trying to destroy his business, trying to destroy his family, trying to assassinate him and coming within 1 millimeter of doing so, try facing 1,000 years in prison. Who can survive that? He can, because I think he's called for this moment. He's so strong. But when you look at all of that and what he personally went through, the sacrifice, but what it allowed us, to your point, was that 4 years of preparation and organization and bringing the true team together and being ready again to meet this moment. So that's how I see it in a historical context. I've always said that 500 years from now, they're going to be writing about this time in American history in a way that we can't even foresee, but in a way that I believe is written about the Civil War. I mean, we're at the same sort of an inflection point in American history that we were in the 1860s, certainly in the 1770s as we were preparing for revolution and independence. That's where we are today. And it's not some radical notion of, we all need to bear arms and go fight the bad guys or the tyranny. It's about fighting for freedom in today's historical context. And that's what we are doing. So yeah, now we pivot to what that looks like in terms of governing, and being a part of that is the greatest honor. I'm so proud, but also working alongside. It's not about any of us. It's not even about Donald Trump. It's about God and it's about America. And that's the most righteous battle of all from my perspective.
You actually gave me chills when you were talking about that, because I think that's a side of President Trump that, I mean, certainly better than I know, but even the experiences that I have had with him, it is not about him, even though a lot of people go, oh, it's about him. I think the moment that even some of the people left of center realized it wasn't about him was when he gets shot in the head and he looks out at the crowd. He didn't look out at the crowd to say, look at me. He said, keep going.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And that was, you could see in his face, that was concern for the people, not for him.
Yeah.
And that was, even when I would go and sit with you guys and attend your meetings. I remember one where you walked in and you said, we have a special guest on the phone.
Yes.
But that, to me, people say he's accessible.
Yeah.
And it's not that he's just accessible. It's that he wants you to know he cares about you.
Yeah, that's true. And, you think about the wherewithal that day he was shot, July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania. And at that moment, it was within a half of a second, he said, stand aside, let me tell the people to never give up and to keep fighting for this country. And, in those moments, he didn't know. He could have had a bullet lodged in his brain, right? He could have been breathing his last breaths. He didn't know. And it's the shock of that it really, the true measure of a man, of a woman, of a soldier, of a warrior isn't necessarily, preparing for battle or whatever that looks like, but it is in the heat of the moment. That's, I think, when the true measure of a person is tested. And for those that maybe didn't believe in him before or didn't believe in his strength or his character, that, I think, answered so many questions and inspired millions of people. And again, for him to stand up, but then for him to continue to campaign and then to win all the swing states, including yours, Tudor, which I know you had a huge part in, to win the popular vote, to then take that as a mandate and to be, again, so fearless in the face of so much adversity is just, it's the story of 1,000 years that this country is going to be talking about for many, 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 many hundreds of years after you and I are gone.
I believe it. I believe that this is a legacy that is lasting for as long as this earth is around. People are going to be talking about what happened in this. I mean, just like we talk about Lincoln, just like we talk about Reagan, there are people who make a mark that is bigger than life itself. And that, I believe, is what is going on here. And I think that the interesting part about this administration, it's different than the last one. You brought that up, but he has very carefully chosen the right people for the right moment, for the right positions. And that, I believe, is you in this position because you understand ag in a way that other people couldn't possibly. But also, just my own experience of going through the state of Michigan, the farmers are under attack. They feel like the taxes are too high, the fertilizer is too expensive. They are struggling with whether or not they keep their family farm or they sell it to a solar farm and we lose the farm altogether. And that, to me, and we also have the Chinese coming into the United States and buying farmland. There is so much that is going on in agriculture right now. And you are the one standing there saying, I'm going to protect it. I'm going to lower costs, and going to the UK, getting them to buy more of our products. I mean, it's so much right now. And I'm so impressed with what you've been able to do. I just want you to know that.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate that. And, it's funny. This job was not on my bingo card. I was not planning or asking to be the Secretary of Agriculture. But the president saw something, and he did in the first term too. I, started running the Office of American Innovation, and then I got a little more responsibility, and then was basically told that I was going to take over the Domestic Policy Council. And I said, "Ooh, I don't know if that's going to work. I've got all these kids." And he said, "Brooke, I believe in you, and I think you can do it." And something very similar on this job. But now I see that God's plan and Donald Trump's plan, even though it was different than my own, is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I feel so strongly, and I'm so proud and inspired by our farmers and our ranchers. And to your point, Tudor, that you so eloquently made, that this is the moment that we have to choose in this country, whether we go forward into, 1,000 years of prosperity, or whether we go back into, socialism, government tyranny, the elitists deciding for us what's best for ourselves. And obviously President Trump has stepped into that gap, but now with his vision, we've got to effectuate that. And from the agriculture perspective, like you said, and I've said, if we can't feed ourselves as a nation, and if our family farms keep going out of business, and if they keep getting sold to the Chinese, and if we keep having this sort of international conglomeration where not just the Chinese, but other foreign countries are buying up our farms and putting them, under one big corporate banner, we will not survive as a nation. And it may not be next year, and it may not be in 10 years, but it will happen. The very backbone and fabric of America is so woven into our agriculture and rural communities. And I know you see that in Michigan, a state that is really focused on specialty crops. So you don't have a lot of the big, huge farms there, but you've got a lot of family farms in Michigan where we have to ensure that those second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, seventh generation farms can move on to the next generation and thrive and prosper in a way that maybe they haven't in this lifetime. But we also have to make sure that we're opening up the market for new farmers, for those who maybe didn't grow up in farming, but want a life of dignity and righteous work that you can get in working the land in a way that maybe, again, Tudor, in our lifetimes, we've never really seen before. And so pivoting the focus, when I was in Nebraska yesterday, we'd been building this rural prosperity and small family farm plan we announced yesterday, where we're really focused on that farm that is multi-generational, but that isn't, part of the big, huge conglomeration, that we've got to keep them strong, and we've got to make sure they can make a living and support their family, while, again, at the same time, opening up the markets for new farmers. So I think that's, hopefully I'll walk out of here in 4 years. I met Paige yesterday. She was, I think, 4 years old. Her dad, her granddad, and her great granddad were all there. And they're all on the same piece of land that her great granddad bought and farmed, 100 years ago. And that's where we did our farmer roundtable yesterday in Nebraska. That's where I launched the initiative. But in all of USDA, all of government approach on what we need to do. And it's multi-layered with lots of different pieces, but what we need to do to stay extremely focused on that size of our farms and making sure they can move forward.
I just had a conversation with a manufacturer this morning, and this conversation reminds me of that, because he's a part of a big group of manufacturers. And he said, and I used to be a part of that group when my family owned a foundry. And I said something about, I remember when he and I had gone on a trip together, and he said, the association doesn't do those trips anymore, because it used to be that the foundries were all owned by families, but now it's big corporations that have come in, and they don't want their presidents and CEOs to leave on these trips. So they've stopped doing that. And I thought, oh my gosh, how terrible that the family foundry, the family farm, a very similar situation. And that was how it was. It was families that worked there for generations. They're going by the wayside. And that's where you step in. That's where you step in and protect. And that's what Donald Trump understands in a way other presidents haven't even thought of. They haven't even cared.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's interesting to think that the billionaire real estate mogul from New York City, and I don't want to get in front of him, but I would guess that maybe he hadn't spent much time on a cattle farm, right, or cattle ranch, or walked through row crops out in the country before he became president, but that he would be the one that would, more than any other president in our lifetime, would understand deep in his soul that unless we fight for, we effectuate policies for, we honor our ag community and our rural communities, we will lose our country. And the fact that it's Donald Trump and, and the choices that he's made to surround himself with certain cabinet members, I see God at work in all of it. I see God's hand on all of it. I see God's hand on President Trump. I see it on our cabinet. You can feel it. I was just over at the White House before I came to tape with you. You can just feel the spirit moving over there. And it's such a joy to be a part of it.
That's what I think is the most beautiful part about your position, because you came in here and you said, this isn't what I was expecting. But do you notice that there have been attacks against the administration and all of this choice and that choice? I've heard nobody coming after you. I think that people have looked at who you are, what your history is, and they see you out there working. And it really is. I do believe that there have been so many people praying for this administration, that there are people that were chosen that are beyond his choice. Like you said, this is God saying, these are where these people need to be placed. And you didn't even know that.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's funny. In the last administration, I hosted a Bible study, and in the Great Pause, hosted a Bible study. Now we're doing a cabinet Bible study here at USDA every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. And you can feel it. But when people ask, what can we do? You're in the fire every day. For 8-9 straight years, I've said, just pray for us. Just pray for wisdom and protection and guidance in what we're doing. These are really important times, and we won't be perfect. We will certainly be imperfect. But I just believe with that foundation of prayer and the biblical foundation behind everything we're doing. And Tudor, you were part of the AFPI, AFW family and still are, that we have always based everything in scripture, always. And every policy, every decision, what we've done, we're not a religious based organization. We're a policy based organization, but all of it is founded in the word. And I just think that's made a difference. I have no doubt the attacks will come. If they haven't yet, they're coming. I just, putting on my armor of light, which is a scripture reference. I just think about that every day. Today, I'm going to put on my armor of light, and I'm going to do my very best, and I'm going to keep fighting for America. I'm going to hopefully effectuate President Trump's vision. And when it's time for me to go home and raise more cattle and start barrel racing again, I'll be so excited for that day. But until that day, this is where I'm supposed to be. And there's no better place, no place I'd rather be than here.
I love it. And we didn't get into egg prices or anything else, but I know that that's all going down. This, I think, was a lot better, because the insight that you just gave us was so amazing. And I'm so glad you were here. Secretary Brooke Rollins, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Tudor, what a joy. Thank you. It was my honor. We'll see you soon.
Sounds good. And thank you all for joining us on this podcast. For this one and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com, the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time. Have a blessed day.